Hello everyone, I'm Rihanna.
I'm Adelie.
And welcome to our podcast. Recently we made a series called Global Issues, and today's episode is going to be about
poverty. So Rihanna, what is poverty anyways?
That is a very good question. Basically, poverty is the inability to meet basic survival needs due to a lack of financial resources or material assets. It is often linked to poor health, limited education or skills, unemployment, and risky behaviors. While these factors are common, the core issue is the lack of access to essentials. Poverty is widely seen as harmful to both individuals and society.
Well, it's very interesting. What exactly are we going to be covering throughout this podcast?
So today we are going to be talking about 4 topics that we're going to cover. The first one's going to be about poverty versus poor. What's the difference? Second topic is going to be about how greatly is the population affected by poverty. Third, why do so many people live below the poverty line? And lastly, how does corruption lead to poverty?
Well, I wasn't really sure that there was a difference between poverty and poor.
Yes, so do I.
Yeah, so maybe we can have a special guest, Audrey, to come and clarify the difference for us.
Relative poverty, or poor, means that you can make money, but not enough to meet necessities. Absolute poverty is when you are unable to make any money, and you are living day to day with no hope for the future. Relative poverty is used to measure poverty in developed countries, such as the USA. Absolute poverty is used to measure poverty in underdeveloped countries.
How does poverty affect the life of a poor family?
Because when they are poor, they are not able to get proper food, proper school, and so on. Because of this, poor people and people who live in poverty are stuck in the poverty cycle. Children who grow up in the poverty cycle will end up repeating it, because they will not have education. Since those children only know what it's like to live in poverty, they will not be able to fit in with the other classes. A person who is poor or lives in poverty will only learn the rules of their own way of life and not be able to relate to higher classes, which makes more segregation.
What exactly is the difference?
Finding the difference between poverty and poor is not as easy as it sounds. There are many different reasons for both to happen. But for what I have researched, poverty is when the household income is non-existent or extremely low, and poor is when a household income is below 50%, which is less than everybody else.
Thank you so much, Audrey, for enlightening us on the difference between poverty versus poor. Now we're going to move on to our next topic, and I think Adelie right here has researched her own little findings on how greatly is population affected by poverty. Would you like to tell us on your findings?
Yes, I have some statistics from worldbank.org. So poverty is a major worldwide issue that affects almost 700 million people. 8.5% of the global population live off of only $2.15 daily, which is considered the extreme poverty line. 3/4 of people living in extreme poverty line live in sub-Saharan Africa, which is due to their weaker economic growth but greater population growth. 44% live on less than $6.85 daily, which is the upper middle income poverty line. Children and youth account for 2/3 of the population living in extreme poverty. That's an estimated of 593 million children who live without basic necessities. It would cost $175 billion per year to end extreme poverty worldwide in 20 years.
$175 billion for a year, and that's going to take 20 years just for poverty to end?
Yes, which really puts into perspective how worldwide this issue is. 430.3 million people living in extreme poverty in Africa, 120.3 million in Asia, 3.2 million in Europe, 12.4 million in North America, 29 million in South America, and 3 million in Oceania. The top 3 poorest countries are Nigeria with 71 million, Democratic Republic of Congo with 68 million, and India with 44 million. Not having enough money to get by is only one aspect of poverty. A person's inability to afford food, medical care, education, and job security are just a few of the many aspects of life that are affected by poverty. In addition to these physical limitations, poverty impacts a person's ability to access opportunities that would help them to enhance their quality of life. Rihanna, why do so many people live below the poverty line?
There are so many reasons as to why people live below the poverty line, and it's just because for the lack of basic necessities such as food, water, shelter, education, or healthcare. Other causes for people to live in or below the poverty line are poor government, warfare, conflict, lack of good jobs, discrimination against gender or ethnicity, exploitation, inflation, or natural disasters.
Could you go into depth on some of those?
Yeah, of course. For example, poor governments. Assisting those who need is something that many governments are either reluctant or unable to do. This could mean aggressively punishing the citizens, taking funds from people in need, and neglecting to provide proper facilities or failing to supply social assistance programs. People in poverty will probably remain struggling if their government does not address their needs.
What about warfare and conflict?
Typically, poverty is higher in areas that's affected by war. Everything comes to a halt during the conflicts, both production and nations' GDP drop. Since foreign companies and governments will not want to invest, it isn't easy to get things going, and war and conflict can make it impossible for individuals and families to stay in one location as their home, land, and assets are destroyed along with it. Women frequently take on the role of the provider, and they face multiple challenges such as discrimination and, unfortunately, domestic violence.
And this is related to current events
Mhm.
because of the Ukraine-Russian war as well as the Israel-Hamas war.
Yeah.
What about inflation? I feel like that would also play a big part.
Yeah, with prices going up all around the world, many people are struggling to make ends meet. Those who were already in need in the first place will have the highest possibility to live in poverty. Even the most basic item will cost greatly. A statistics from the World Food Program shows that households with low incomes are spending approximately 60 to 80% of their income on food.
That is very unfortunate.
Yes, it is. And so, to cover our last topic for today's episode, we have Leslie Santana to help us answer the question of how does corruption lead to poverty?
Thank you so much for having me. So, corruption worsens poverty and inequality by drastically changing financial processes and weakening public trust in organizations. It takes funds designated for important services, limiting resources from reaching people in most need, particularly in communities that are excluded. Poor people have no access to decent services, prolonging the cycle of poverty. This limits both domestic and foreign investments by creating inefficient and insecure business environments, limiting employment and economic progress. Furthermore, corruption benefits elites who use their power to change policies and systems to their benefit, increasing inequality. The marginalized and low income populations face systematic impediments to growth because they cannot pay incentives or get access to valid networks. This dynamic weakens social bonds and citizens lose trust in governmental institutions that fail to meet their requirements. Therefore, resources are wasted, and governments prioritize projects or policies that benefit the private sector over the public welfare.
What are the consequences of this?
So, this lack of accountability stifles innovation and policy reforms aimed at tackling structural inequalities, eventually continuing a vicious cycle of corruption and poverty that undermines long-term development. This restricting effect on growth has direct influence on income distribution, giving those who are excluded a fewer possibility to improve their lives.
Thank you, Leslie. I feel like we have covered most of the major problems that are related to poverty. But I was wondering if there are any solutions?
So, one of the solutions we came with is social inclusion, because economic growth can be driven by increased female labor force participation, but it requires decent work, equal pay, and strong social protections. Investing in skilled jobs for women benefits society and promotes sustainable development.
That's actually a very good solution, Leslie, especially for women to have equal pay and to benefit society's development. But I also feel like there might be more solutions to poverty. What do you think about that, Audrey?
Education is also a good solution because it can open the doors for jobs, resources, and skills that help a person not only to survive, but thrive. In fact, according to UNESCO, if all students in low-income countries had just basic reading skills, an estimated 171 million people could escape extreme poverty. And if all adults completed secondary education, we could cut the global poverty rate by more than half.
I agree that education provides society with what they need to succeed. Both solutions are very valid. In your opinion, what would be the better solution?
Education. Because education is a powerful tool for breaking the cycle of poverty by equipping individuals with the skills and knowledge needed to access better job opportunities and improve their earning potential.
Education fosters economic growth, reduces inequality, and empowers marginalized groups, ultimately leading to a more prosperous and equitable society.
Thank you, Audrey and Leslie, for your input. That's all the time we have for today, but thank you for watching.